This video is based on real events and contains discussions of violence, crime, and other disturbing subject matter. Some viewers may find the content upsetting. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. She couldn't scream. And he knew it. For 8 years, he walked into that bedroom in the dead of night, and not a single person knew. Not a neighbor, not a doctor, not even the woman sleeping down the hall. The woman who had spent her entire life making sure her daughter was safe. Then came October 2022, a small camera, installed for medical reasons, pointed at a bed. The timestamp reads 2:47 a.m. A mother presses play. And in 3 minutes, everything she thought she knew about the man in her home, the life she had built, and the daughter she had protected for 31 years, is ripped apart. What that footage revealed would shake investigators to their core. It would expose not just one predator, but a system that had been warned multiple times, across multiple states, and did nothing. This is the story of Ashley Vigil, a young woman who never spoke a single word in her life, and whose silence, for 8 years, was the very thing that made her the perfect victim. Before we go any further, what you are about to hear is a true story. The crimes committed in this case were carried out against a severely disabled adult who was entirely unable to protect herself. Some of what we cover tonight is deeply disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. If this is your first time here, welcome to Silent Case Files. Every story we tell in this series is real. Every victim deserves to be heard. That is why we do this. If that means something to you, hit subscribe, drop a like, and let us know in the comments where in the world you are watching. From tonight, let's talk about Ashley Vigil, Price, Utah, Carbon County, coal country, a place built on the land itself, on what could be pulled out of the earth and turned into something that kept the rest of the country running. Price is the county seat, a culturally diverse community, rich in history, surrounded by landscapes that stretched wide and quiet in every direction. The kind of place where people still know their neighbors by name, where the same families have lived on the same streets for generations, where, when something happens to someone, people show up. Population, 8,715. Small enough that everybody knows your business. Small enough that a family in crisis rarely goes unnoticed for long. It is 2022. America is slowly finding its footing again after 2 years that cracked something open in the country. Pandemic restrictions are lifting. Communities are reaching back toward each other, cautiously, carefully, rebuilding the kind of trust that had frayed at the edges. People are opening their doors again, letting people back in. And in a modest home, on a quiet residential street in Price, a woman named Paula Vigil is doing what she has done every single day for the past 31 years. She is taking care of her daughter. Every room in that house has been arranged around one purpose. Every piece of medical equipment placed with precision. Every corner of every space designed to make life not just livable, but safe, comfortable, as full as it could possibly be for a young woman whose body had never allowed her the freedoms the rest of us take for granted. From the outside, it looks like any other house on any other street. From the inside, it is a fortress. One that Paula Vigil has spent 3 decades building, reinforcing, and defending with everything she has. But here is the thing about fortresses. They can be breached from the inside. Ashley Vigil was born the way most children are born, with a future wide open in front of her. For the first several months of her life, she hit her milestones. She grew. She responded to her mother's voice. She was, by every visible measure, a healthy baby girl beginning her life in the world. Then something shifted. Babies with Rett syndrome typically appear to develop normally for their first 6 months. Then they begin to lose the skills they previously had, the ability to crawl, to walk, to communicate, to use their hands. Paula Vigil watched her daughter change. Slowly at first, small things that were easy to explain away, and then undeniably. The diagnosis, when it came, arrived like a thunderbolt. Rett syndrome. a rare genetic neurological disorder that affects the way the brain develops. It causes a progressive loss of motor skills and language. It primarily affects females. In the United States, the disorder affects 1 in 10 girls by the age of 12. Let that sink in for a moment. 1 in 10,000. Over time, children with Rett syndrome have increasing problems with the use of muscles that control movement, coordination, and communication. It can also cause seizures and intellectual disabilities. Unusual hand movements replace purposeful hand use. For Ashley, this meant everything most of us do without thinking. Walking, speaking, feeding herself, moving her own body was taken from her gradually, relentlessly, one ability at a time. She could not walk. She could not talk. She could not fight. She could not scream. She could not tell anyone what was being done to her. Doctors told Paula to prepare herself. Her daughter, they said, would likely not see her 11th birthday. They did not know Ashley Vigil. Against every medical prediction, Ashley not only survived, she reached adulthood. She turned 20, then 30, then 31, a young woman who had spent her entire life defying what the medical textbooks said was possible. She grew, Paula would later say, to about the size of an 8-year-old girl. As an adult, she weighed just 48 pounds. Her frame was small enough that every pound she lost was a medical emergency in its own right. And yet, her presence in that home was immense. Those who loved her learned her language, the language she had built from inside a body that would not cooperate. A slight movement of her eyes could mean yes. A particular expression could signal discomfort. A stillness that felt different from other stillnesses could mean something was wrong. She loved being read to, especially by her grandmother. There was something about those moments. A voice she trusted, a story unfolding, a world she could visit, even if she could never physically walk through it, that brought her a peace that people around her could see and feel. Paula described her daughter this way. She was trapped in her tiny body, but her spirit was unbound. Ashley Vigil could not move through the world on her own terms, but she was loved, deeply, completely. And for 31 years, she was safe, until she wasn't. Paula Vigil did not choose an easy life. She chose Ashley. Every single day for decades, she woke up and began the same routine. Gentle care, careful feeding, medication management, physical therapy, all of it done with the precision of a nurse and the devotion of a mother who understood more deeply than most people ever will what it meant to be somebody's entire world. She called it Ashley's tiny safe bubble. Every corner of their home had been built around one purpose, keeping Ashley not just alive, but cared for, comfortable, known. Because Paula understood that even inside a body that would not cooperate, Ashley was still fully there, still present, still deserving of every effort Paula could give, and it had cost her. There had been nights with no sleep, medical emergencies that arrived without warning, moments where the fear of losing her daughter sat so heavy that Paula could barely breathe through, but they had come through, every single one. Doctors told us there was very little likelihood she would make it to see her 11th birthday, Paula said. Together, we could beat anything. And they did. For years, the two of them, mother and daughter, against every odd the medical world had stacked against them. But by 2014, Paula had been doing this alone for a very long time. She was devoted, she was determined, and she was exhausted in the way that only a person who has given everything, every hour, every resource, every piece of themselves, to someone else can be exhausted. That year, for the first time in a long time, someone came into their lives who seemed to want to help carry the weight. Paula could not have known what he was really carrying with it. His name was Kenneth Urban. He was 52 years old when everything came apart, a medical equipment supplier, a man who, on the surface, made perfect sense in the context of this household. He understood medical needs. He understood care requirements. He did not recoil from the reality of Ashley's condition the way some people did. Urban entered Paula Vigil's life in 2014, and from the very beginning, Paula was honest with him. She told him exactly what her life looked like. The doctor's appointments, the surgeries, the medications, the sleepless nights, the weight of it, all of it, landing on one person day after day after day. I told him my life is doctor's appointments and surgeries, she said. It was a warning, and it was a test, a way of saying, before you take another step toward us, you need to know what this is. This is not an ordinary household. This is not an easy life. If you are not ready for this, now is the time to walk away. Urban did not walk away. He stepped closer. He seemed to understand. He seemed to want to help. To neighbors, to acquaintances, to anyone looking in from the outside, he was the man who had shown up for a woman, carrying an impossible weight. A partner for Paula. A calm presence in a house that had known very little calm. He was patient. He was steady. He was by every visible measure exactly what Paula needed. But something else was happening inside that house. Something quiet. Something that would take years to surface. Ashley's seizures, which had been manageable for years, began increasing. Her weight, already dangerously low, began to fall further. A new kind of distress entered her nights. Small shifts in her demeanor that those who loved her sensed without being able to name. Paula noticed. She took Ashley back to the doctors. She adjusted medications. She sat up through the night, watching her daughter. She did everything a devoted mother does when something feels wrong. She fought harder. What she could not have known was that the thing making Ashley worse was not a medical problem. It was sleeping down the hall. Because what Kenneth Urban had never told Paula, what he had never told anyone in that town, was that he had done this before. Urban left Paula S. in early 2014, and later that same year, he met Paula Vigil and Ashley in Utah. He had not changed. He had simply moved on. And the system, the very system designed to stop men like him, had let him walk straight through the door. 8 years. Let that settle for a moment. 8 years between the day Brian Urban walked into that house in 2014 and the October night in 2022 when a small camera finally told the truth he had worked so hard to bury. 8 years of Ashley's condition, worsening in ways that confounded the doctors trying to help her. Seizures are common in Rett syndrome. Sleep disturbances, waking in the night with crying or screaming, problems with chewing and swallowing, weight and feeding difficulties. These are all recognized features of the condition, which is precisely why, for 8 years, every alarm bell that should have sounded was silenced by a plausible medical explanation. Ashley's seizures were getting worse. Of course they were. She had Rett syndrome. Ashley was losing weight. Of course she was. Feeding difficulties were part of her condition. Ashley seemed distressed at night. Of course she did. Sleep disturbances were expected. Every sign, every symptom, every change that anyone noticed, explained away, filed under the condition, attributed to progression, and Urban knew exactly how the mathematics of that worked. He had chosen, with calculated precision, a victim whose suffering could not be reported, whose distress could not be articulated, and whose deteriorating health had a ready-made explanation that would satisfy every doctor, every carer, and every person who loved her. Paula was not negligent, she was not blind. She was a devoted, exhausted, meticulous mother who was doing everything right, taking Ashley to every appointment, fighting for every adjustment in her care, sitting up through seizures in the middle of the night. She just had no idea what she was really fighting, because behind the closed door of Ashley's bedroom, in the darkness, while the town slept, and Paula trusted, a predator was methodically exploiting the most defenseless victim he had ever found, a young woman trapped inside her own body, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to call for help. Her body was seizing, and she was crying for help in the only way she could, and no one knew. Not for 8 years. 8 years inside the fortress Paula had built with her own hands. The tiny, safe bubble she had promised her daughter would always keep her protected. None of it was random. None of it was coincidence. All of it was deliberate. All of it was hidden. and it would stay hidden until the night a camera saw what no one else had been able to see. By late 2022, Ashley's doctors were out of answers. Her seizures had suddenly increased. The medical team could not explain the spike. They could not identify a new trigger. They could not understand why a patient who had been relatively stable for years was now deteriorating so sharply. So they did what doctors do when they need more information. Ashley's doctor recommended Paula put cameras in her room to capture the seizures so they could get a better idea of what was going on. A practical decision, a medical one, the kind of thing any devoted parent would do without a second thought. Paula bought the cameras. And then she did something that, in hindsight, carries a weight she could not have foreseen. She asked Urban to help her install them. He knew they were there. He helped put them up himself. And still, he kept going. That detail alone tells you everything you need to know about the kind of man Kenneth Urban was. The kind of arrogance. The kind of certainty that he would never be caught. That Ashley would never tell. That Paula would never know. The camera had one job: to find the cause of Ashley's suffering. It found it. October 2022, Paula Vigil sits alone. The house is quiet. She pulls up the footage. She is looking for seizures. She is looking for the moment Ashley's body betrays her, the way it has so many times before. She is looking for something she can take to a doctor. Something that might finally explain what has been happening to her daughter. The timestamp on the recording reads 2:47 a.m. She watches. What the camera had captured was not a seizure. Urban enters Ashley's bedroom in the middle of the night. And what follows? In the silence of that room, while Paula slept down the hall and the town of Price lay dark and still, is the systematic violation of the one place Ashley Vigil had ever truly been safe. He was not frantic. He was not impulsive. He was methodical. Vigil discovers Urban moving her daughter, undressing her, then putting her diaper back on and moving her again. Careful, deliberate, leaving no visible trace for the morning, returning Ashley to her bed as though nothing had happened. Because nothing for 8 years ever had. Paula watches all of this on a small screen in her own home. Then I found out why everything had changed, because he was raping her, she said. Think about what it means to receive that information, not from a phone call, not from a stranger at the door, but from footage, playing on a screen, in your own hands, of your own child, in the home you built to keep her safe. Her body was seizing, Paula said, and she was crying for help in the only way she could. Paula had spent 31 years learning Ashley's language. Every expression, every movement, every signal her daughter's body could produce. She had read every one of them with the precision of someone whose daughter's life depended on it. And now she understood what Ashley had been trying to tell her. It took over an hour for the police to come. All the while, Ashley was alone with him again, and her phone was still stopped. On her daughter's rape, her hands were shaking. Her voice was steady. She made the call, and in that moment, the moment Paula Vigil picked up that phone, 8 years of silence ended. Paula would later testify, her voice breaking under the weight of every word. She spent her life trapped in her little tiny body, where she could be safe in her home. Then he took even that, and eventually he took her life. She could beat anything, Paula said, except for him. Paula made the call. South Jordan police responded and arrested Urban. He was taken to the Salt Lake County Jail. Police body camera footage captured the moment of Urban's arrest in October 2022. He did not rage. He did not break down. He was, to the end, exactly what he had always presented himself to be: composed, measured. A man who had spent decades learning how to look like someone with nothing to hide. To anyone watching from the outside, this looked like a domestic matter, a family in crisis, the kind of painful private situation that neighborhoods absorb quietly and move on from. But investigators were watching something else entirely. They had the footage. They had the evidence. And what that footage showed was not a moment of impulse or confusion. It was pattern. It was practice. It was a man who had done this before and had fully expected to keep doing it. Brian Kenneth Urban pleaded guilty to 5 felony charges, including rape and forcible sexual abuse, 5 counts, against a woman who weighed 48 pounds and could not move, could not speak, and could not fight back. This should have been the end of the story. It was not, because as investigators began pulling back the layers of Brian Kenneth Urban's life, his history, his movements, the places he had lived, and the people he had left behind, something was emerging. Something that stretched far beyond the borders of Utah, far beyond 2022, far beyond Ashley. When Brian Kenneth Urban finally stood before a court, he had an explanation ready. In court, Urban blamed high levels of testosterone, steroids, and medication for his actions. His exact words, delivered in front of a packed courtroom: "My testosterone levels were elevated to be extremely high in a short amount of time. I was in a dreamlike state, where reality felt like a dream." The courtroom sat in silence. Not the silence of people considering what he had just said. The silence of people who had already seen the footage. Video after video captured the crime. Played in court for approximately 20 to 30 minutes, there was no confusion in that footage. No disorientation. No man lost in a dreamlike state, stumbling through a room he did not recognize. There was a man who entered a bedroom deliberately, moved a defenseless woman with purpose, committed his crimes, then redressed her and returned her to her bed so that no one would know. That is not a dream, that is a plan. Video evidence had documented the assault. Though initially, Urban had denied everything. He denied it. Then the footage made denial impossible, and so the story changed. Testosterone, medication, a dreamlike state. His defense was a performance. The camera had already delivered the verdict. The camera had exposed Brian Urban. But investigators were beginning to understand that what it had captured was not the beginning of his crimes. It was the end of them. As they dug into Urban's history, his movements, his marriages, the trail of places and people he had left behind, a geography of abuse began to take shape state by state, year by year, victim by victim. It started in Montana. A family from Montana heard about Ashley Vigil's story and drove all the way to Utah to speak out, saying, if their pleas for help had been listened to, then Brian Urban could have been stopped. The woman who did not want her last name shared was known only as Paula S. She had met Urban back in the 90s. Paula S. and Brian had a son, Kaiden. They also took care of her 2 daughters, Kirsten and Alisa, while moving several times to different states. For years, those daughters had carried something they could not speak about. Paula S. said she didn't know what happened to her daughters until they told her as adults. When they finally did, the picture that emerged was devastating. Urban had not targeted one of them. He had targeted all 3. Kirsten's words were direct. He played all 3 of us. The impression that I had was, if it was happening to me, it wasn't happening to her. That sentence, read it again. A child being abused, finding a way to endure it by telling herself that her suffering was protecting her sister. That, if he was hurting her, he was leaving someone else alone. And Urban had known exactly how to make her feel that way. His method of control was simple and brutal. He'd be like, well, I'll hurt your mom if you say anything. Silence through fear. Compliance through threat. A pattern he had built and refined across decades, across state lines, across households, across children who had no way to fight back, and no one who believed them when they tried. Then came Wyoming. Records showed that Urban had been arrested there for strangling a woman. A violent, targeted act of physical control against someone who posed a threat to his freedom. He received 3 years of probation and walked away. But Kirsten and Alisa did not stop trying. Rock Springs, Wyoming police confirmed that both Kirsten and Alisa reported what had happened to them throughout their childhood. Kirsten reported in 2014. Alisa reported in 2017. Alisa described what came after she filed her report in her own words. Months and months and months of, we can't get in contact with Mr. Urban. Mr. Urban won't answer his phone, and Mr. Urban won't answer the door when we came to the house. Months of a man refusing to pick up the phone, refusing to answer the door, and the system that was supposed to pursue him, letting that be enough of a reason to stop. Rock Springs police said they investigated both cases and sent them to prosecutors, who declined to prosecute Urban. Declined. Twice. 2 women. 2 reports. 2 separate years. The same man. The same outcome. Now look at the timeline. Urban left Paula S. in early 2014, and later that same year, he met Paula Vigil and Ashley in Utah. The year Kirsten reported him to Rock Springs police. The year the system looked at what she said and decided it was not worth pursuing, is the exact same year Brian Urban arrived in Price, Utah, and introduced himself to an exhausted mother who was desperate for help. The system did not just fail Kirsten and Elisa. It delivered Ashley. Kirsten said it plainly. If things had been handled properly, this would have never happened to Ashley and her family. If the charges had been pursued even once, just once, Ashley Vigil would never have known his name. The failures were not accidental. They were structural, written into the law itself. When Ashley Vigil's case moved toward sentencing, her family discovered something that stopped them cold. Because Ashley was 31 years old, a legal adult, the protections afforded to her under Utah law were fundamentally different from those that would have applied to a child. Paula had assumed otherwise. She said she thought that because Ashley was in a state as vulnerable as a child, she would be treated as if she were a child. It wasn't until she met with a prosecutor that she was informed. There was no mandatory minimum sentence. None. Attorney Nathaniel Woodward, who had reached out after seeing Paula's story and committed himself to helping change the law, explained exactly what that meant. When a citizen of our state is raped and their attacker found guilty, the severity of the punishment will be determined by whether the victim was an adult or a minor. However, no substantive consideration is given as to an adult victim's mental capacity. Ashley could not walk, could not speak, could not feed herself or signal distress in any way that the law was designed to hear. She was, in every practical sense, as defenseless as a small child. But the law saw only her birth certificate. Under Utah law at the time, if a rape victim was a child under 18 or elderly, the rapist would face a mandatory prison sentence. For Ashley, there was nothing. The system had not failed once, not twice, at every turn Wyoming, Montana. And now in the very courtroom where her abuser stood, the law had looked at Ashley Vigil and found a gap exactly her size. As the legal process moved forward, Ashley was not there to see it. Her body had been carrying the weight of 8 years of trauma on top of a condition that had already asked everything of it. Her seizures grew more frequent, more severe. Her weight, already just 48 pounds, continued to fall. Every ounce lost, a crisis. On March 16, 2024, Ashley's grandmother was reading to her when she died in her arms. Doctors believe it was sudden seizure death. She was 31 years old. Her grandmother, Glenna Gilson, her favorite person in all the world, was doing for Ashley in her final moments exactly what she had always done. Sitting beside her, giving her a story, giving her a world she could visit, even when her body would not let her move through it. Ashley Marie Vigil left the same way she had lived, quietly, with someone who loved her, close enough to hold her. The woman who never spoke, the obituary said, deserves as many words as can be put to paper. Paula, who had spent 31 years defying every prediction about her daughter's life, was now left to fight for her death to mean something. She never stopped. April 5, 2024. West Jordan 3rd District Court. Dozens of people gathered outside the courthouse on the day of Urban's sentencing. They rallied in support of Ashley Vigil, the woman most of them had never met. They came anyway. Ashley's empty chair sat amongst the crowd, a deliberate, devastating symbol of the voice that was no longer there to speak for itself. Who are we here for? Ashley, they shouted, before cramming into a packed courtroom among the Montana family. Paula S., had driven hundreds of miles to be there, to stand in the same room as the man who had destroyed her family first, and then Ashley's. Inside, Urban stood before Judge Stephen Nelson and delivered his statement one final time. Elevated testosterone, steroids, medication, a dreamlike state. The courtroom absorbed it in silence. Then the judge spoke. Judge Stephen Nelson sentenced Urban to serve his 5 convictions consecutively. 5 years to life for each of his 2 rape convictions, and 1 to 15 years for each of his forcible sexual abuse convictions, the maximum the law allowed. Salt Lake County District Attorney Sam Gill said afterwards, "From my perspective, hell is too good of a place for somebody like that." And Paula, the woman who had spent 31 years keeping Ashley alive, and the 18 months since her death fighting for her justice, found the words that said everything. "I thought I was angry before, but now that she died, I'm so angry now." Ashley's story did not end in that courtroom. It was just beginning. Paula Vigil had made her daughter a promise that she would always be safe, that she would always be home. He had taken both of those things, but there was one promise Paula could still keep. "I promised her now that this will be done," Paula said. "I hope to be able to say, no one falls in this hole again. You saved them, Ash." And then, in March 2025, it happened. Governor Spencer Cox signed House Bill 127, Ashley's Law, into law. The new law means those convicted of rape, object rape, or forcible sodomy against incapacitated individuals now face a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years to life in prison. The gap that had protected Brian Urban, the gap that had existed for every predator who targeted a vulnerable adult before him, was closed. This law is named in honor of Ashley Vigil, one of the most innocent and vulnerable victims ever encountered by the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office. The District Attorney's Office stated, "Ashley's Law goes to the heart of our mission as prosecutors, to protect and serve the most vulnerable among us." Ashley could neither protect nor advocate for herself, District Attorney Sim Gill said. Paula Vigil was recognized in the signing for her unwavering advocacy. The mother who had fought for her daughter's life for 31 years, who had then fought for her justice, and who had finally won something. Ashley could not win for herself. Ashley Vigil never spoke a single word, and yet her voice reached the governor's desk. Go back to October 2022. A woman sits alone, a small screen in front of her, a camera she installed to catch a seizure. Paula Vigil once told a man that her life was all about doctor's appointments and surgeries. She said it as a warning. He heard it as an invitation. The tiny, safe bubble she had spent 31 years building. He shattered it quietly, in the dark, for 8 years. But he could not shatter the truth. "She will be remembered for the change she brings," Paula said, "and not for the worst that happened to her. I know that she will be glad that someone else will be protected," Paula said. Ashley's name is now written into law, and for every vulnerable person who cannot speak for themselves, that is what justice looks like. If anything in tonight's story has affected you, support is available. The National Sexual Assault Hotline is free, confidential, and available around the clock. Call or text 1-800-656-HOPE. Thank you for watching. If Ashley's story moved you, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you next time.